Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into the verified historical facts behind what is easily one of the world's most enduring and captivating mysteries. We're going to look closely at the evidence, the timeline, and the sheer scale of an event that has fascinated the globe for nearly a century. We're stripping away the endless rumors and focusing entirely on what the historical record actually tells us.
So let's just ask the ultimate question right up front. How does a legendary aviator simply vanish into thin air? It's a question that completely defies logic, right? Especially when you consider just how famous this pilot was and the massive resources dedicated to bringing her home safely. How does a large modern aircraft drop off the face of the Earth without a single confirmed piece of wreckage being found in the immediate aftermath? Well, to truly understand how this happened, we need to go back to the beginning and look at the pieces on the board.
Section 1. The pilot and the plane. To really grasp the immense stakes of this disappearance, we first have to look at the legend herself and the machine she trusted with her life. Look, Amelia Earhart wasn't just a pilot. She was an absolute phenomenon. Her deep, early life love of flying pushed her to do things literally no one else was doing. She didn't just participate in aviation. She shattered records left and right. Her unparalleled global achievements made her a household name everywhere. We really have to establish her immense importance in aviation history right off the bat, because her level of fame in 1937 was just staggering. When she decided to fly around the world, the entire globe was watching.
And her vessel for this ultimate world flight mission was the Lockheed Electra. This thing was cutting edge for its time. We aren't talking about a standard off-the-assembly line plane here. It was heavily and meticulously prepared for the incredibly perilous journey ahead. It was heavily modified to carry extra fuel, equipped with the absolute latest technology available, and specifically chosen because it had the range and power required for such an ambitious, unprecedented world flight. It was basically the perfect machine for the ultimate test of human endurance and aeronautical engineering. But, a machine is absolutely nothing without its crew. Beside her was Fred Noonan, an expert navigator who was literally essential for this world flight mission. You have to remember, there was no GPS back then. Navigating across vast, featureless oceans required highly complex celestial navigation, reading the stars, calculating wind drift, and plotting courses with sheer mathematical precision. Noonan was one of the absolute best in the business, and Earhart knew for a fact she couldn't conquer the Pacific without him.
Section 2. The global journey. Okay, let's track how this mission actually played out before things went so terribly wrong. Their monumental route around the globe was a massive undertaking. Step 1 involved years of grueling preparation and their initial departure. Step 2 saw them successfully navigating multiple major global stops, flying across South America, Africa, the Indian subcontinent, and Southeast Asia. Step 3 is a stark reminder that every single leg of this journey meant overcoming immense, exhausting challenges, from severe weather to mechanical hiccups and just extreme fatigue. And all of this culminated in Step 4. Their arrival at Lae, New Guinea. At this point, they had already flown over 22,000 miles. They were exhausted, sure, but man, they were so close to the finish line.
Now here is where things get truly terrifying. Think about the massive mismatch they faced next. Extremely limited 1937 navigation technology versus the vast, unforgiving Pacific Ocean. They were trying to find Howland Island. This is a tiny sliver of land in the absolute middle of nowhere, barely a mile and a half long. To find it, they were relying on dead reckoning, star sightings, if the weather even permitted, and really rudimentary radio direction finding. Against the massive scale of the Pacific Ocean, their technological margin for error was virtually zero. I mean, if they were off by just a few degrees over a 1,000-mile stretch, they would miss the island entirely.
Section 3. The final flight. This brings us to the absolute most critical and harrowing part of our explainer, the doomed final leg of the journey. They departed Lae, New Guinea, incredibly heavy, completely loaded down with fuel. En route, as they flew into the pitch-black night, they faced severe navigation challenges. Heavy clouds obscured the stars, making Noonan's crucial celestial navigation nearly impossible. As day finally broke and they began their approach toward where they firmly believed Howland Island to be, the situation deteriorated fast. The final stage of the sequence is marked by frantic radio communication. They were desperately trying to connect with a U.S. Coast Guard cutter that was stationed at Howland Island just to guide them in. The sheer isolation of the Pacific completely magnified these navigation challenges. They were dealing with escalating, severe radio constraints. Their 1937 radio equipment was their one and only fragile lifeline, but they were really struggling to get a two-way signal going.
The Coast Guard ship could hear Earhart perfectly fine, but it seems she either couldn't hear their replies or she couldn't lock onto their radio signal to use it as a homing beacon. Just imagine the terror of flying over an endless ocean, knowing your destination is right in front of you somewhere, but being completely unable to see it or hear the people desperately trying to guide you to safety.
The tension literally peaks with her last known messages. The verified historical record shows her frantic, incredibly urgent radio transmissions explicitly stating one critical thing: fuel concerns. They were flying on a line of position, searching frantically back and forth in the area they believed the island had to be. Her voice was described by the radio operators as hurried and frantic. And then, just silence. The transmissions completely stopped. Section 4, the massive search. When that radio finally fell silent, the reaction back home was immediate and totally unprecedented. The sheer magnitude of the response was staggering. The primary force was the U.S. Navy, and they didn't just deploy a couple of boats, they sent out an entire fleet of ships and aircraft. And the scale? It was an unprecedented, massive search operation. President Franklin D. Roosevelt personally authorized immense resources for this. They scoured hundreds of thousands of square miles of the terrifyingly large Pacific Ocean. It was literally the most expensive and extensive search in naval history at that time. They looked absolutely everywhere they mathematically thought she could have glided or drifted. So, the crucial takeaway here is that despite the sheer scale of that massive search operation, they found nothing. No plane, no debris, no Amelia, and no Fred. Because of this massive vacuum of information, thousands of rumors have popped up over the decades. But in this explainer, we have to stay grounded in facts. We must rely solely on verified historical evidence, separating concrete data from the endless wild theories. And the cold hard facts are this: she took off, she encountered terrible radio and navigation trouble, she reported running critically low on fuel, and despite a massive search, absolutely no trace was confirmed at the time. Which leaves us with the ultimate chilling cliffhanger to end on. If Amelia never reached Howland Island, where did she go? Did the Electra simply run out of gas, crash, and sink immediately into the miles-deep ocean trench? Or did they manage to make a desperate crash landing on a completely different, uninhabited coral reef somewhere else in the vast Pacific? The verified historical record stops exactly where the radio went silent.
You know, when you think about the ultimate cold case of the Pacific Ocean, one name instantly comes to mind. So let's dive into this explainer and re-examine the 1937 disappearance of Amelia Earhart. It's a mystery that has completely baffled historians, inspired countless expeditions, and literally cost millions of dollars in search efforts. Today, we're going to separate the incredible facts from the wild fiction to figure out what most likely happened on that fateful day. To get to the bottom of this, we'll structure our investigation today by first recapping the aviation mystery itself. Then, we'll analyze the leading theories, explore the modern high-tech search, separate fact from fiction, and finally, reveal the most likely answer. Okay, Part 1. The enduring aviation mystery. Picture this. The year is 1937. Amelia Earhart is, without a doubt, a global icon, and she's on the verge of completing this incredibly daring flight around the equator. But somewhere over the vast, unforgiving Pacific Ocean, she and her navigator just vanish. There was no clear distress signal, no wreckage, absolutely zero physical trace. And it's exactly that complete lack of evidence that instantly transformed a tragic loss into a decades-long global obsession.
Moving into Part 2, analyzing the leading theories.
For decades now, experts have been arguing over her final moments. Did she simply run out of gas due to a tragic mathematical error, or is there way more to the story? Let's act like detectives for a second and cross-examine the top 3 theories.
First up, we have the crash and sink theory. The idea here is pretty straightforward, yet incredibly tragic. Earhart and her navigator couldn't locate their tiny island destination. Their fuel simply ran dry, and the plane ditched directly into the ocean. Now here is where it gets tricky, because this theory is split by a fascinating contradiction. On the one hand, cold hard logic absolutely supports it. I mean, 1930s navigation limits were super strict, and the ocean conditions were treacherous. Missing that island was highly probable. But pushing back against that logic are these unexplained, post-disappearance radio signals. For days, operators claimed they were picking up Earhart's distress calls. And you have to wonder, if the plane sank immediately to the ocean floor, how on earth could the radio still transmit?
Well, that brings us to our second major theory, which paints a completely different picture. The Nikumaroro Island hypothesis proposes that Earhart didn't crash into the open water at all.
Instead, she managed to land her plane on a remote coral atoll, surviving, at least for a little while, as a castaway.
The evidence for this one is like a massive tug-of-war. Recent archaeological digs on the island have actually unearthed 1930s beauty products and parts of shoes, which leans heavily toward the castaway idea. It's compelling stuff. However, despite these incredible finds, there is still a complete lack of conclusive DNA evidence or intact aircraft wreckage. Without a positive DNA match or definitive plane parts, historical opinion remains sharply divided.
All right, finally, we have to look at the third and probably most fiercely debated theory, the Japanese capture theory. This asserts that Earhart flew wildly off course, landed in the Marshall Islands, and was actually taken prisoner by Japanese forces in the lead-up to World War II.
The entire foundation of this theory relies heavily on local islander rumors and alleged eyewitness sightings passed down through generations. But modern historians broadly reject this idea today for one very simple reason. There is a complete lack of official documentation. Neither the US nor the Japanese governments have ever produced a single piece of validated evidence. And as investigators, we really have to follow verifiable data, not just rumors.
So with all these theories still being debated after nearly a century, it begs a massive question. Are we looking in the wrong place entirely? Or have we simply been using the wrong tools to search the vast Pacific?
Which leads us right into Section 3, the high-tech search.
Listen, today's investigators are definitely not relying on vintage maps. They are deploying an incredible sci-fi-level arsenal out there. We're talking about advanced sonar mapping the crushing, pitch-black depths of the ocean floor, deep-sea exploration vessels, and satellite imagery scanning remote atolls right from space. Couple all of that with advanced DNA sequencing on recovered bone fragments, and you have these highly funded recovery missions pushing the absolute limits of modern science to try and close this case.
Next up, Section 4, Fact versus Fiction.
You know, when a mystery lingers in the public consciousness for nearly 100 years, human nature tries to fill in the blanks, and that is exactly where verifiable history ends and wild mythology begins.
I'm sure you've heard some of the wilder rumors that Earhart was on a secret government spy mission, or she was the victim of a massive deliberate conspiracy, or even abducted by aliens. Well, let's be unequivocally clear on this. Mainstream aviation historians consider these purely speculative and entirely unproven. Unless the aliens left a forwarding address, there is absolutely no credible evidence to support any of these claims. They firmly belong in science fiction, not history.
All right, finally, Section 5, the most likely answer.
To truly understand the consensus today, we have to respect the sheer scale of the environment. Finding a 1930s aircraft in the Pacific isn't just looking for a needle in a haystack. It's like looking for a microscopic needle in a turbulent, three-dimensional haystack that happens to be thousands of miles wide and miles deep. Combined with the strict navigation limits of 1937 and Earhart's massive historical significance, it perfectly explains why the lack of missing wreckage still captivates us.
So, while we can't exactly stamp case closed on this until a physical piece of the plane is found, the historical consensus leans heavily in one direction. Most experts broadly accept that Earhart simply ran out of fuel and perished in a crash-and-sink scenario. It's just the most mathematically and logistically sound explanation we have. But the tragic reality is, her exact final location remains a closely guarded secret of the deep Pacific.
Ultimately, what you should take away from this explainer is that our ongoing search for Amelia Earhart is a massive testament to human curiosity. We have used every single tool at our disposal, from vintage maps to modern DNA sequencing, to try and bring her home. But until that one undeniable piece of evidence is finally found, the fascination with Earhart's final flight will absolutely continue to soar. It really makes you wonder, will the Pacific Ocean ever give up its greatest secret? Or is the mystery itself Amelia Earhart's true, enduring legacy?